The Fox and the Grapes. One bright and sunny day, a fox wandered through the forest in search of food. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him of how hungry he was. As he walked along a winding path, his eyes suddenly caught sight of a vine hanging from a tall tree, laden with clusters of plump, juicy grapes. They looked absolutely delicious, glistening in the sunlight, and the fox's mouth watered at the sight of them. Excitedly, the fox ran toward the vine, his heart filled with anticipation. He stood on his hind legs, stretched his body as much as he could, and reached up, hoping to grab a bunch of those tempting grapes. However, the grapes were hanging far too high for him to reach. Undeterred, the fox decided to give it another try. He crouched down, preparing himself for a mighty leap, and sprang up with all his strength. But alas, his efforts were in vain. He missed the grapes by several inches. Determined not to give up so easily, the fox tried again and again. He jumped higher and higher, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get close to the luscious grapes. His frustration grew with each failed attempt. Panting and tired, he took a step back and glared at the grapes, as if blaming them for being out of his reach. The fox's persistence and determination were admirable, but the reality of the situation began to sink in. He was simply not tall enough to reach the grapes, and no amount of jumping would change that fact. After one last, desperate attempt that ended in failure, the fox sat down on the ground, feeling utterly defeated. As he caught his breath, a thought crossed his mind. "Why am I wasting my time and energy on these grapes?" he muttered to himself. "They are probably sour and unripe anyway. I'm sure they wouldn't taste good at all." The fox nodded to himself, convincing himself that he didn't really want the grapes in the first place. With a final glance at the unattainable fruit, the fox turned around and trotted off, his nose held high in the air. He tried to ignore the rumbling in his stomach and the nagging feeling of disappointment. "There must be better food out there for me," he told himself. "I don't need those grapes." As he continued his journey through the forest, the fox couldn't help but feel a bit more cheerful. Even though he hadn't managed to get the grapes, he had learned something important. Sometimes it's easier to convince ourselves that what we can't have isn't worth having. The fox kept his eyes open for other opportunities, determined to find something that would satisfy his hunger. And so the fox trotted on, leaving the grapes hanging high on the vine, untouched and unbothered. He ventured deeper into the forest, hopeful that his next meal would be within his reach. The lesson he had learned stayed with him, reminding him that not everything we desire is meant for us, and that it's okay to let go and move on. In the end, the fox's journey continued, and who knows what other adventures awaited him in the vast, green forest. But one thing was certain. He would face them all with the same determination and cleverness that had always been a part of his nature.